Welcome, friends, and welcome to all lovers of stories and tales on our channel, where magic meets imagination and words transform into worlds, where we live the most beautiful adventures. I greet you from the heart of the Arab world, and I hope you are in the best of health and wellness. Are you ready for a new journey? Have you prepared your favorite drink? Then relax, open your hearts and minds, and don't forget to leave us a comment telling us which country you are following us from, and what you think of today's wisdom after we reach the finish line. Our story today is not just any story. It is a tale that proves that strength is not in bulging muscles or sharp swords, but in a brave heart and a sharp mind, even if the owner of this heart is very small, the size of a hand. Our story today is titled The Princess Who Was Saved by a Mouse. So let's begin with God's blessing. In a distant kingdom called Avalon, where mountains embraced the clouds and rivers flowed with crystal-clear water, lived a young princess named Luna. Luna was not just an ordinary princess who wore jewel-studded crowns and sat on silk and velvet all day. She was a free spirit who loved nature more than she loved the formal, boring palace parties. Luna was 18 years old, with long black hair that cascaded like a waterfall of night over her shoulders, and wide, honey-colored eyes that shone with intelligence and kindness. However, despite all this beauty and luxury, Luna felt trapped in a hidden prison. Her father, King Theodore, feared for her from a breath of wind, preventing her from leaving the high castle walls, fearing the dangers of the outside world, especially after the early death of her mother, the queen. The palace, with its singing gardens, was Luna's only world. While armed guards watched every gate, Luna found her only solace in the neglected back garden of the palace. There, away from the eyes of governesses and ministers, a strange friendship developed, not with a handsome prince or a brave knight, but with a small creature covered in gray fur, with large ears and shining eyes like two black beads. It was the mouse Sesame. Sesame was an intelligent mouse, unlike the other mice of the kingdom who spent their days searching for cheese in the sewers. Sesame loved listening to Luna's stories, which he read aloud, and he waited for her every day by the trunk of the ancient oak tree to feed him luxurious royal breadcrumbs. Luna told him about her dreams of seeing the sea and her desire to run in open fields, and Sesame listened attentively, shaking his long whiskers as if he understood every word, perhaps whispering a faint squeak to console her in her loneliness. Luna did not know that this small creature would one day be her only army.
And on a stormy night, where the sky roared with thunder and lightning tore through the darkness like fingers of fire, everything changed in the kingdom of Avalon. The thunder was not natural that night. It was the sound of heavy footsteps shaking the earth. The kingdom awoke to a terror it had never witnessed before. From amidst the thick fog surrounding the Black Mountains, the giant Goliath appeared. He was a colossal being, taller than the castle towers, with stony skin and eyes glowing blood red. Goliath was an evil sorcerer banished from the kingdom decades ago, and he had returned today for revenge. Goliath shattered the castle gate with a single blow from his massive club, and guards scattered like tiny dolls. King Theodore screamed, ordering his soldiers to defend the palace, but arrows bounced off the giant's skin as if they were harmless pins. The giant headed directly towards the princess's tower. There, while Luna trembled in a corner of her room, Goliath ripped off the tower roof with his massive hand. Luna screamed in terror, a scream swallowed by the sound of the storm. The giant picked her up in his rough hand like a child picking up a toy and said in a voice like grinding rocks, "You will be the hostage until your father hands me the crown of the kingdom and the keys to the treasuries." King Theodore ran towards the square, screaming his daughter's name, but the giant had already turned with wide strides, disappearing into the darkness of the forest, leaving behind destruction and despair.
In that utter chaos, amidst the scattered debris, there was a small heart beating frantically. It was Sesame, who was hiding in a crack in the wall, watching his only friend being abducted. Sesame felt terror, for his tiny body was nothing compared to one of the giant's fingernails. But he remembered the breadcrumbs. He remembered the sad smile. He remembered the warm voice that used to read him stories. Sesame knew at that moment that staying safe in his burrow meant betraying friendship. He made his decision, a decision that any animal in the forest would have laughed at with scorn. The mouse would save the princess. Sesame ran with all the speed his tiny legs possessed, following the giant's foul smell and the deep craters his footprints left in the ground. What would take a human hours was for a mouse an epic journey, an infinite distance.
Sesame's true adventure began the moment he exited the safe castle walls. The outside world was wild and terrifying. The grass that humans trampled carelessly was for him a dense forest obstructing his vision, and the sounds of the night meant certain death. The first obstacle he faced was the roaring river. It was merely a small stream, but for Sesame, it was a vast ocean whose current swept away rocks. Sesame stood on the bank, trembling from cold and fear. How would he cross? He looked around intelligently and found a wide sycamore leaf that had fallen from a tree. He pushed it with difficulty towards the water, then jumped onto it using a small twig as a paddle. The water tossed him around, and he almost capsized several times. A large fish with sharp teeth tried to swallow him, but he hit the water surface with his tail and maneuvered skillfully until he reached the other bank, exhausted and wet. But he did not stop. He continued his journey towards the Black Forest, home of monsters and shadows. There, where moonlight did not reach, Sesame faced a greater danger. A hunting owl with wide eyes watched him from a branch. The owl swooped down silently with its sharp talons. Sesame felt the current of air above his head, and at the last moment, he jumped inside a hollow tree trunk. The owl's talons struck the wood forcefully, and Sesame waited with a heart beating like a war drum until the owl gave up and flew away. Fear gnawed at his heart. "I'm just a mouse. What am I doing here?" he whispered to himself. But the image of Luna screaming in the giant's hand pushed him to emerge again. He continued running for days and nights, feeding on wild berries and drinking dewdrops. His body ached, and his tiny paws were cut by thorns and pebbles, but his determination was harder than steel. Finally, he reached Skull Mountain, where the giant Goliath's cave was located. The cave was at the top of the mountain, and reaching it required climbing sharp and slippery rocks. Sesame began to climb, digging his small claws into the cracks. The wind lashed at him, trying to hurl him into the abyss, and each time he slipped, he clung to a plant root or a rock protrusion, refusing to give up, until he finally reached the dark entrance of the cave, from which the smell of dampness and decay emanated. Sesame crept into the cave. The place was enormous, with very high ceilings from which stalactites hung like sharp teeth. In the far corner, he saw a large cage suspended in the air by a massive iron chain. Inside the cage was Princess Luna, sitting with her knees drawn to her chest, her royal dress torn and dirty, her eyes swollen from crying. Meanwhile, the giant Goliath was sound asleep on a pile of animal hides, his snoring like thunder shaking the corners of the cave. Sesame approached with extreme caution. Every step was calculated, for if he stepped on a dry bone and made a sound, it would be the end for him and the princess. Sesame climbed the rugged rock wall until he reached the chain holding the cage, then walked on the swaying chain with astonishing balance until he reached the cage. "Psst, Luna," Sesame whispered softly. Luna slowly raised her head, disbelieving her eyes, rubbing them, thinking she was hallucinating from hunger and fear. "Sesame, is that you?" she whispered in shock. "How did you get here? You're so small." Sesame smiled and said in his mouse language, which she understood with her heart, "Size isn't everything, my lady. I came to get you out." Luna looked at the enormous lock securing the cage and said despairingly, "Impossible, Sesame. The key is on the giant's belt, and he's asleep. If he wakes up, he'll eat us." Sesame looked at the sleeping giant, then at the lock, and said, "We won't need the key." Sesame began to gnaw at the leather ropes that tied the cage bars together from the upper corner. The mouse's teeth were strong and sharp, but the ropes were very thick and coated with tar.
Sesame worked for hours, his jaw aching, the taste of tar filling his mouth, but he did not stop. The giant would stir in his sleep from time to time, causing Sesame and Luna to freeze in place, holding their breaths. Then the snoring would resume, and Sesame would continue his work. Finally, the last rope broke, and the corner bars were freed enough for Luna to slip her slender body out. "Come on, quickly," Sesame said. Luna and Sesame descended very carefully from the chain to the ground. The distance was high, but Luna jumped lightly onto a pile of straw. They were almost at the cave's exit when suddenly the unexpected happened. Sesame accidentally stepped on the tail of a large wildcat that the giant kept for guarding. The cat shrieked loudly, waking the giant. Goliath opened his bloodshot eyes and saw the empty cage. "Where did you go, you mischievous girl?" he roared in a terrifying voice, and saw Luna running towards the exit. "You won't escape me!" The giant rose, his footsteps shaking the ground. Luna ran with all her might, and Sesame ran beside her, shouting, "To the right! Enter the narrow crack!" Luna knew she couldn't outrun the giant, so she resorted to Sesame's trick. She entered a narrow rock crevice that the giant could not enter with his massive body. The giant inserted his hand, trying to grab her, and his fingers were getting close to her face. Luna screamed. Here came Sesame's role for the last time in this battle. Sesame jumped with astonishing courage onto the giant's hand and sank his teeth with all his might into Goliath's finger. The giant screamed in pain, quickly withdrew his hand, and slammed it against the wall in anger and agony. Luna seized this moment and slipped out through a back exit of the crevice that Sesame had discovered upon entering. They emerged on the other side of the mountain and began to descend rapidly, while the giant tried to smash the mountain behind them, but its rocks were too hard to break quickly. They continued running all night, down the mountain, through the forest, and across the river, fear giving them wings, until the lights of Avalon Castle appeared with dawn. When they reached the gate, both collapsed from exhaustion. The guards saw them, and King Theodore rushed out in his nightclothes, hugging his daughter with tears streaming down his face. "Luna, my daughter, how did you return? Who saved you? Which army did I send without knowing?" Luna looked at her father, then knelt down and picked up Sesame, who was panting from exhaustion. She placed him on her palm and said in a loud voice that all the soldiers and courtiers heard, "No army saved me, father, nor a knight, but this little one saved me, who has the heart of a lion." Silence fell in the square. The king looked at the dirty little mouse in astonishment. Then the king knelt on one knee, an act he had never done for anyone before, and looked at Sesame, saying, "Little one, today you have taught us a lesson that the kingdom of Avalon will not forget for generations. Courage is not measured by height, but by the greatness of the heart." The king ordered that a small golden palace be made for Sesame, and that he be treated as a national hero, allowed to enter anywhere in the palace. From that day, Luna also changed. She was no longer the confined princess, but became wiser and stronger, convincing her father that true strength lies in compassion and appreciating the smallest creatures. They all lived in peace, and people passed down through generations the story of the mouse who defeated a giant and saved a kingdom. And so, my friends, we learn not to despise anyone for their small size or humble status, for God may place his secret in the weakest of his creation. Contentment and loyalty are the true treasures, and greed and arrogance, as we saw in Goliath, lead to loss and regret. I hope this story has pleased you, and do not forget that will creates miracles. May you be safe in God's care, and see you in a new tale.